Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dream Design Podcast with Amy Lee. I'm your host, Amy Lee Westervelt, and today, y'all, I have such a good guest. I love this gal. I've been on her podcast. I've been in summits with her. She has amazing energy. She is incredible. You guys, I have no word of a lie. I have Jessie Harris Bouton here. She is a certified life and business growth coach and, get this, a world champion race car driver. To say that I am fangirling is an understatement. So here is Jessie. Welcome, Jessie.
Oh my goodness. Thank you, Amy Lee. I'm so excited to be here. But like that intro, whew, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to have you on the show. Obviously I've been following you for a while, and then we made friends. And so it's been, fantastic having you here. But I really want to kind of start at the beginning because obviously, I don't know. I mean, I can't say that for sure, but I would think most little girls don't grow up and say, I'm going to be a world champion race car driver and I'm going to be a coach. And so, you've had this remarkable life. You have a beautiful family. I would love to hear, how did you get to where you are now? Like, what was the trajectory for this incredible dream that you're building?
Yeah. Thank you so much for setting that up. It's funny. I actually, I'm going to share something that I have not shared publicly anywhere else yet, like not even to my own community, because I just had this huge realization, which I don't know how I saw it or didn't, I should say, see it before this. But as you said, I'm a certified life and business growth coach, and I'm really, really proud of that. But I kind of joke that I became that plain and simple because I was struggling to keep myself accountable to some of my own goals. So I decided to go learn how to do it by becoming a certified coach. And then I never intended to really build a business. I actually also own a physical therapy clinic, a 7-figure physical therapy clinic with my husband in our hometown. So I really didn't necessarily need to start my own business, but I was still struggling to show up and do the things that I had now been taught how to do to hit some big goals in my life. And I just decided that, you know what, I always show up for other people better than myself. So I am going to start a business, and I'm going to hold them accountable, because if I have to hold them accountable, then I have to be accountable. And if we look back all the way to, the beginning years for me, part of my story is my dad passed away when I was 11 years old unexpectedly. And that kind of sent me down this spiral of really feeling just unfulfilled, unhappy, not seen, not heard. My mom was a single mom, and so I had to, really help out a lot. And I was definitely not like the star student or the star athlete. And I actually went out on this journey to become a professional race car driver when I was about 20 years old, because I felt like it was something I was passionate about. I loved racing. My family did it as a hobby. They would go to the local drag strips. But I didn't want to go pay money to do it. I was like, I want to go become this big professional race car driver and then show other underdogs, whether they were men or women, but show other underdogs that you can do this thing. And I was going to really hold myself accountable to going out and making it, right? Quote unquote, making it. And there's a whole story, which we won't dig into, but it took me 5 years to make it, and $60,000 of my own money, traveling across the country, introducing myself, getting lots of no's and no responses, to finally just get one opportunity. And so this is in the 2000s. This is kind of like, hopefully you're my people and you're going to know the song I'm going to reference, but this is like the Eminem song. You only get one shot to not miss your chance to blow this opportunity up, right? In a lifetime. Okay, I won't sing it, but it's this aha moment of somebody saw me, somebody heard me, and I was like, we got to go all in. But guess what the opportunity was? You said I was a former professional race car driver, but what the kicker is that it was a 300-mile-per-hour race car that I got the opportunity to go drive. You don't really learn how to drive those, right, in your backyard. So it was quite an undertaking. It was really something that I was very intimidated by. I almost said no to the opportunity that I tried so hard for so long, because I'm like, I have no experience doing this. I can't possibly do this. And I just felt in this moment, actually, I had kind of cast God out of my life for many, many years when my dad passed away. And I almost felt in this moment that like God said to me, Jessie, this is your moment. This is not about you. This is about the platform that this will give you to inspire other people. And so my whole career, I'm not saying that I haven't chased, success and built success for me. Of course I have. I'm human. I do have those things in me of where I, again, want to feel seen and heard. But it really has always been of how I can take these things that I've been through, good and bad, and inspire others. And it all stems back to like the real aha I've had recently, Amy, is that it all stems back to me just being insecure, to me just wanting to feel seen and heard. That I think is what so many, actually, I know that that's a primal need that we all as humans have, is to feel seen and heard and to be accepted just as you are, right? And so that's a huge part of who I am and what it is that I do as a former professional race car driver. And now as a certified life and business growth coach, I've created the Millionaire Mompreneur Project, where I help women create a 7-figure business in the coaching arena in part-time hours, but only because it was never about the 7 figures, but it was about, man, like making 6 figures was hard. Like, we can keep going and scaling this and so on, so that then I can teach others to do it, because I have a whole story of where I sacrificed myself to achieve a lot of those successes and sacrifice my family. I'm a mama 5. Like, what's wrong with me? You get it, right? So, without, taking up the whole time here, like part of my story and what I'm so passionate about, plain and simple, comes from a lot of the things in my life that I've felt really insecure about, that have caused me pain. I'm very, very purpose driven.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because number one, we're both, we're generators, and you mentioned that, but also like the worthiness blocks, right? Like until we had human design, we didn't really understand, like, I can do all these incredible things, and yet I still don't feel the feelings of it. And, one of the things I like to say, it's like if if you're a diabetic and you don't have the enzyme for insulin, you don't sit there and say, I really wish I could work harder to have insulin. You're like, you just don't have it. So understanding that some of us just don't have that innate worthiness feeling does not mean that we're not worthy. And so being able to really recognize that and be like, oh my gosh, here I am showing these women, like, you're worthy regardless. Like, you are absolutely capable of creating your 6 and 7-figure business. But then if she is, then so are you. And so there's, and I call it, I think when it comes to coaching, I feel like what it should really be called is growth under a microscope, because coaching is really about us growing ourselves and being the example for somebody to walk with and to follow, right? Especially when you get into like the high level mentorship part of coaching. And I think you're a beautiful example of that, right? Because you're like, hey, I figured it out, or I'm figuring it out, or I just realized that the reason I do things this way is because this is what I'm struggling with. And then being able to impart that, from a storyteller perspective to your client, and have them be like, well, if Jessie can do it, I can do it, right? Like, look at what she has overcome, with everything that's going on with your family. And I'll leave it to you if you want to share that or not, and having all these children, which I can say having all these children. When other people say it, I get offended, right? But us moms of 5, we can say all these children, or I can say, and I have 17 kids, like, it's okay when I say it. Don't say it to me in the grocery store, y'all. Don't do it. Just don't do it.
When you have one by your side.
Right, no kidding. You know how that happens, right?
Oh,
yeah.
gosh.
So, yeah, there's like a whole list of those things. I know what you two were doing. So do I.
You're making me laugh because, yes, I've heard it 1,000 times and it's not funny anymore, right? And then people are like, well, you're not laughing. I'm like, it's like the 95th.
Yeah, it's definitely, we've heard those ones. It's fine. Okay, so getting into the meat of it, right? Because obviously we're here. We love hearing our stories. We love sharing those pieces. But I think a lot of the women out here are like, you perked my ears, 6, 7-figure businesses. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and I've heard this a lot in the business sector, and I want to know what your thoughts were. A lot of people say that it's actually harder to get to six figures than it is to jump from 6 to 7. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you agree, if you disagree.
I affirm that wholeheartedly. In my case, that is absolutely my story. I have a few things to say that I'm going to circle back around to that I think will play in nicely to all of what you said. But truthfully, when I was trying to build to six figures, I was more focused on what do I need to do? 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 And this is even harder for me to admit, but I love that it's a part of my story and I'm happy to admit it. I had a 7-figure brick and mortar physical therapy clinic and I could not grow an online business. Like I struggled so much for 2 years. I definitely spent more than I made, sacrificed myself, sacrificed my family. And I have this like turning point where I was able to go from making like 30K a year to making 30K in 30 days and then continuing to grow and scale. But the shift for me really there was when I stopped trying to just learn what it was I needed to do and started becoming who it was that I needed to be in order to grow that business. It is so much more about, the way I like to say it to people is like, when you hire a mentor, you should be hiring them first and foremost for who they are going to teach you to be versus just what to do. Yes, absolutely. You need to learn what to do. There has to be action associated. I actually get really, I won't say a bad word, but I get annoyed with people, the way that a lot of times they talk about like the law of manifestation and such, because it is just talked about in like, believe it and you will see it. And there is always an aspect as a certified life coach, there's only 2 things that we have control over in life. And that is our belief and our action, but they go together. They do not work alone. They go together. And so, yes, you have to believe, for example, that you can be that 7-figure business owner before you ever are going to become her. And you have to actually not just believe it, but you have to start to act like her. And I'm using 7-figure business owner, right? Just because my brand is the Millionaire Mompreneur Project, but apply this to anything that you can think of that you are going after. For those of you who are listening, whether it's a health goal, a relationship goal, etc., it does not matter. You have to think about, for example, how would I show up as a 7-figure business owner when you are still under 6 figures? And I promise you, it's very, very different. You have to remember in life that what got you here where you are today has been absolutely required and necessary to get here, but it will not be the same thing that gets you to where you want to go in the future. Something has to change. And you must know that, as the law of manifestation talks about, but maybe not as clearly as I'd like with action, is that we attract what we are, not what we want. And so it's important for us to start showing up consistently, acting in a way of the person who's going to achieve that 7 figures. So I became a different person on my journey from 6 to 7 figures. I wasn't willing to do the hustle and grind anymore, right? I actually hustle and grinded to make 6 figures, working 40, 50 hours, sacrificing myself, and then went to 7 very, very quickly, working less than part-time hours as a one-woman show. I'm very proud of that because I didn't see anybody else embodying that. I couldn't find anybody else teaching me that that was possible. And the one thing that I do that maybe not everybody does, and I think it's like required, especially in entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is like the new American dream, but a lot of people are not actually cut out for it. They're, enticed by, the carrot out there, the shiny object of like, oh, I can make all this money from home doing da-da-da. I also have, like, I might not work, the same amount of hours, but I do work very hard. I show up in a much higher level capacity making 7 figures than I did at 6, right? Not that hobby business owner anymore. Like, dude, I'm a 7-figure business owner on her way to 8 figures. And that woman shows up way differently than the woman 5 years ago, way differently from belief to action. So, like I affirm and agree totally that it's been easier to make 7 than 6, but easier in the way of maybe like time and not hustle and grind, but the personal growth that I've had to go through to become that person who can not even just achieve it, but maintain and sustain it and continue to scale it. That work has been the toughest. The toughest. I know you can relate. Like, I know that you can relate to this.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's funny because people don't realize, like, entrepreneurism or entrepreneurship, I guess, but really entrepreneurism, right?
Yeah.
It's like a way of being. It's more of a personality trait, I feel like, than just a job. Like, I feel like you've got, you talk about like our generation, we have a lot of people who were raised by parents who maybe were a little bit more absent, didn't necessarily have the same emotional investment in us, or were we allowed to even have emotions at all? And so because of that, we're not emotionally calibrated to be in a corporate environment. So a lot of us are actually entrepreneurs and entrepreneur-minded people who maybe even still are in the workforce, because there's this interpersonal communication that we just don't have the same handle on. And what I mean by that is like when somebody comes to you in the morning and it's like, good morning, and you're like, and they're like, oh, hey, you immediately think there's something wrong. And then you start self-sabotaging in this interpersonal relationship because you're so used to this codependency of, as long as I do the right thing, I'm okay. And when I don't do the right thing, so I think that entrepreneurship in and of itself is kind of like a personality trait. And a lot of times you've got people who want to do this because they don't want to work for someone else or with someone else, and they don't necessarily have those skills of like, how do I make this sustainable? So they look at it from the perspective of, I want this lifestyle. It's not like, and I've thought of this, it's not even about the money they want to make. It's about the lifestyle. It's about, I don't have to answer to anybody. Nobody's going to be mad at me. It's about, so really, I think it's important that people recognize like having these foundational concepts is crucial to be able to have that. And it doesn't like, there's this, like you said, the glamorization of the 6-figure and the 7-figure, but like, let's talk about sustainability first. Like you have to start with sustainability as an online business, like being able to eat, right? And if you have any vendors or whatever, that you pay, like that comes later. But I think a lot of people try to jump to this like 6 figures, or now we've got 6 figures a month, right? And some people are even talking about 7 figures a month. And are people doing that? Yes. But I think it's kind of like, it's like when you climb a mountain, right? You can't just go directly up the mountain. There are literally like camps for you to stop, spend the night. There's such a thing as elevation sickness. And so we've got a lot of these women out here who genuinely want to never have to punch a clock again. But at the same time, they're like shooting for the moon when they haven't built the spaceship yet. And so I think what you said is so crucial, because yes, you can have a really powerful, great, I have a 6-figure career as a whatever in corporate, and then go, well, how come I can't? It's just not the same thing,
Yeah. It's so great. So I'm a car girl. The analogy I would use with that is it's just like you can't shift a car from 1st to 6th without stalling, right?
I didn't even know there was a 6th.
You have to go from 1st gear, 2nd gear, 3rd gear, 4th, right? But we all, and it's so funny because every single one of us here today listening to this has a time that you can think about when you tried to go from where you are now at 0 to 100 miles per hour to get to that destination. That is not sustainable. I know that we think it is. It is not sustainable. You have to build up the momentum 1% at a time, 1% at a time, so that you can sustain and maintain that and then continue to grow and scale. And the cool thing is when you finally, let's just say, hit that first 100 and you're able to maintain and sustain that, you're going to start over again, but not back from the beginning. You're going to start over again from here, right? So many people do the, 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. And it's because they're not willing to go 1 step first. They always want to go 2. They always want to go 5. And listen, what you don't know about me is I am the shortcut queen. That was the demise of me for a very long time, right? I just told you I drove these 300-mile-an-hour race cars. Like I was all about going from A to B as fast as possible, as quickly as possible, and of course safely and as the winner. But that is something I've done in my entire life, even in my business. And what I learned is I actually am still very much like a shortcut. I'm all about simple, high impact systems, right? For me, systems simplify processes, and processes are the pathway to power. And this is where a lot of people go wrong. So for me, the example I'll give, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, but I have a story of where I had this big 7-figure business, brick and mortar, then tried to go online, struggled in the online space, felt really not good enough, whole story, finally figured some things out through like the hustle and grind and so on. But I had built something that literally the only way I was making money was when I was hawking it, marketing it and selling it, and when I was working it. And when I wasn't, I wasn't making money. And so a few years ago now, almost 3, it'll be 3 years, this December 31st, 2019, I welcomed baby number 5, little Lorenzo. And I had a business that had been really growing, and I had some systems and things in place, but really not to probably what they should have been. So I welcomed baby number 5. 3 months later, the pandemic hits, right? In February, March 2020. 3 months later, after that, my husband gets diagnosed with his first episode of cancer. 6 months later, he was diagnosed with 3, had lost 80 pounds, and they were preparing us for the end 2 days before Christmas of 2020. This is me as a mom of 5 with a brand new infant still on the boob. Obviously, no amount of money was worth me losing any time with my husband and with my children. And so I had been at this crossroads of like, going to close down my business, going to close down my coaching empire and just pick it back up whenever. So I wasn't going to market anymore. I wasn't going to sell anymore. And I was just going to keep the clients that I had, show up for them. But what I did at that time, I actually kind of stumbled on the most amazing business model that I didn't really understand that much about, but I like took all of my one-on-ones and I put them into this group, this private Facebook group. And I was like, guys, I'm going to try to be available for you one-on-one, but this is my life right now. I can only do it so much. The rest, what I want us to do is have this community. We're going to work together. I'm going to show up. We're going to do live hot seat coaching every single week. And these women were like all for it because they had they had hearts for me. They felt so bad that I was in this and they really loved me. And I loved them. And not only were they so kind about it, they started to get even better results than they were getting with me on one-on-one. And I was working very limited hours. So this is where I launched into like, wow, this is really amazing. Maybe I'll just keep it as a group coaching thing and just keep selling people into that because I can do this. So I'll sell people into group coaching. And then from there, I was like, well, because I really felt passionate, even though I was willing to give up my business, dude, my business is also like a baby. Okay. I hate when people say that, but at the same time, it's like, no, I'm meant to be doing this.
And it shows you the difference between the vocation and the career, right? Like this is your life's work. Like you could be a billionaire tomorrow, you're still going to do this. So that's a really big, crucial piece to mention.
Yeah. And I thank you so much for doing that because it is like, this is, and if you're here listening to this today, I know that that's who you are. You are somebody who feels that this is your life's work that you're pursuing. And hopefully, you'll take some little things from this and apply it to your own life in whatever way you feel called to. But for me, I moved into building out automated marketing and sales systems. And I had a lot of people who I paid a lot of money, high mentors and coaches tell me like, you're going to have to outsource your sales calls. And I was not willing to do that. It didn't feel good to me. And I was not willing to do that. And so then I decided, okay, I'm going to automate this, a funnel to walk people to me. And then I'm going to pitch them to sell through this automation into my DMs. And I'll start selling people there because that worked for me. And super long story short here is within 30 days of launching all of that, I had my first 100K month. And I worked less than 5 hours a week to do that by myself as a one-woman show. And it was sustainable. It was growing month by month. Why? I'm going to circle it back to what I said at the beginning of this tangent. For me, right, it was building that solid foundation that worked for me instead of me hustling and grinding. It was building systems and processes that continued to take people down the line, right? And I now do have an assistant. It's like the best thing I've ever done in my life. But I mean, I took a time where I felt like I was going to not only potentially grieve the loss of my husband, but maybe grieve the loss of what I felt like was my life's work, what God was really calling me to do, and flipped the switch and was able to have my business keep growing and also get the time that I needed to be there for my husband and my kids and also heal him holistically. We did a little bit of, if anybody cares to know this, our cancer journey. He had 3 different cancers. We, 2 days before Christmas, they were checking us in to start his first round of immunotherapy, and it almost killed him. And I looked at him and I said, babe, I don't think you can do this. You're not going to make it. I think we have to do something holistically. And he agreed and went against all of our best doctors, and he is still here. He's still going through a journey, but I mean, he is still here almost 3 years later when he was on his deathbed by every doctor. They're like, yeah, it's a miracle. So how cool is that I was just willing to stop doing it the old hustle and grind way. And I do believe God is a big part of that story and journey too. But if we're looking at the things, help me build my dream business, around my dream life, it really comes down to staying in alignment with what felt 100% right to me, and then leveraging the power of systems and automation.
And I love how you said that, like my dream life, like when something like what happened to you with your husband, and thank you for sharing that. And obviously my prayers and my heart goes out to you guys. Everything else is like, I don't care about the vacation in the Maldives. I don't care about the 7, extra bays in my garage. Like you come to terms so quickly with what really matters. And I think that, that's a really important part of this. Like one of the things that people don't see when they're struggling financially, all they can see is the money. It's not even possible to understand that there could be a problem that would be tantamount to money problems. And when you have money, you see exactly all the problems that are still there. I remember one of my very good friends, I love her to pieces. She'll watch this and be like, that was me. Her husband has a really good career in the military. He just got picked up for another rank, which is super awesome. And I remember sitting there with her at one point and being like, what's it like to just be like a kept woman? Like, do you even have problems? And she just looked at me like, girl, like, and I remember looking back at that and just thinking like, where was my head? Like, and then she proceeded to, pour her eyes out to me. She's like, I was at, Gymboree today and my kids weren't behaving and I don't feel good. And like, of course people have problems, right? But nobody understands that when money is the chief concern. And so for you to be able to share that, like, yeah, guys, I had everything. I was making $100,000 a month and my life was falling apart, and people just can't compute those two things. So I think it's so important that you share that so openly, and to be able to recognize that this is a huge part of who you are. And heaven forbid your husband went on to a better place. Chances are, if that ever, heaven forbid, a million years down the road happens, this is still where you're going to be, because this is who you were always meant to be. And like you said, God had a big part of that. And I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I really do. Like, one thing that has been really important for me, because, I created the Millionaire Mompreneur Project by accident. I just knew 6 figures didn't change my life. 7 figures did. And I realized that it was really not that hard to make 7. Like, if you could make 6, honestly, if you can make $1, like if you can sell anything, then you can make 7+ figures, promise me, or I promise you. But I've become really passionate over the years, not only about like, really, that is possible for anybody, but also money does not buy happiness. Like, at all. Like, you just hit the nail on the head with, referring it back to like my whole health issues and this. In fact, money couldn't buy me the best doctors in the world. For 6 months, I literally I was on the phone for 6 months with the world's best cancer doctors. And my husband is a kidney transplant patient too, which also throws a whole, story in it. But I mean, like, my whole life, my whole next job became 6 months of on the phone with doctors and submitting things and testing and all this stuff. Even money couldn't buy me my husband's life, right? And how many times have we all thought like, well, they have money, they can just go do this. In fact, like, guess what? I had money. You know how many people did not show up on my doorstep with even dinners? Because guess what? Jessie and her family have money. They don't need us to give her food when she's literally in the biggest hell of her life. And I say that like, not in a way of like obnoxious thing, but like, I know that this is the subconscious that people have around money. And I'm here to break that stigma. Like, I'm a 7-figure business coach that does not vacation in the Maldives, that does not have any name brand fancy red bottom shoes. Maybe someday I will have fancy stuff like that, because it might become something that I'd like to acquire. And hey, I've earned the opportunity to. But like, for me, growing my business was, number one, about having more meaning in my life, right? My life's work, more meaning in my life. Yes, more money, but more money because of the freedom that it brought with it. And for me, it was freedom to do whatever the heck I wanted, whenever the heck I wanted, however the heck I wanted. What if I wasn't making that type of money and my husband's health? My husband most likely would have died, because we would have kept him in that immunotherapy, because I had to be at the 9 to 5 and the kids and all the things. Like, let's just be honest. That's probably what would have happened. I feel that very, very clearly. And so for me, money has just really given me freedom to be able to do things, but it doesn't necessarily, it certainly has not brought me happiness. That's for sure. Somebody needed to hear that today.
No, absolutely. And I'm actually in the middle of, or I just finished a masterclass called The Villain, which talks all about how we would actually rather be the victim than the villain. We're so afraid to be the person who has, because that makes us the bad guy. And so we live our lives in this like suspended reality of poverty rather than upsetting somebody, because like you said, like people are, didn't even bring you food. I mean, I had the HOA after me because the outside of my house, there's some problem, but have they ever said, oh, we know you have a special needs son. Can one of us come over and hold him while you call him? Like, it's like, nobody thinks that way. So I completely 100%, I'm like so with you on that. And like, oh, people just assume that you don't have any problems. I feel like we could do a whole like podcast just
that's a whole other episode.
And it just goes to show you, like, when they talk about being around the 5 people, whatever, the influential people, when you do start having these conversations and sharing the space with people like us who are having these conversations, you are going to elevate your income. Like, you really genuinely getting into a container like Jessie has, or a container like I have, you're around people who are having different conversations, who are at a different level. And that genuinely starts to really kind of, it just energetically raises you. It can't not, you know what I mean?
2 things that just came up for me with what you said is I love it. And number 1, I'm going to say is, like you just made an example of getting into the containers like we have, let's say, and that we're not here pitching y'all on that, guys. Like, if that's great, but we're giving you examples. And like, my clients come from a place of, they are joining my program, not because they're worried they can't win without it. They know they can already win because they're ready to win and move to that next level. They're ready to win with the people that they are surrounding themselves with. Like, that is just such a different mindset approach, right? We so often make choices and decisions in our lives based out of fear, when really we need to be making our choices and decisions based out of what we desire most. And it's a favorite Nelson Mandela quote of mine that really references this well. But he says, like, may all of your choices reflect your hopes and not your fears. Think about if you just made that one simple shift today, how entirely different your life could look. And something else that you said, talking about your villain masterclass, I think it's amazing to me how so very often we avoid putting other people in an uncomfortable position. But in order to do so, we're willing to put ourselves in an uncomfortable position. That just does not make sense.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. And yeah, you absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. Like, so many people are away motivated. Like, I've got to get away from this thing. And everything they do is to keep running from something rather than toward motivated, where they're trying to go towards something, right? Like, I'm in pursuit of, and like you said, that energetic shift, it can be the exact same thing, the same action, but changing the intention, it's like the energetic, difference is absolutely mind blowing. Oh my goodness, Jessie, I could literally talk to you all day long, but I want to make sure that these guys get their links, get to meet you, get to know all the things there are. So first of all, tell us, how can we find you on social?
Yeah, so the best place to find me is on Instagram. I am Jessie Harris Bouton on Instagram. I'm also, she's got it all queued up. I also have a free Facebook group called the Millionaire Mompreneur Project. Look, she's ready. And then lastly, my website is millionairemompreneur.com.
And it's all amazing. She's got really great tips on there. She's got great people in her community. It's a really high vibe, very engaged energy. So if you guys are looking for that, looking for something where you can like dive in and get those tips, she obviously, she has tons of energy too. And it's just a really great community to be part of. I know lots of ladies who've been, who've risen up through the programs there, and they are just loving it. And we certainly love you, Jessie. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Any final words you'd like to leave us with before I let you go?
Thank you. I love you. No, honestly, you know what I want to share? I want to share the power of the internet. Like, look, Amy Lee's like, I don't even know when I exactly found you and so on, but like, look at how beautiful the internet has been for you and I. Like, we could never do what we are doing in our hometowns, like the old school way of where you go and you meet out at these networking.
Not with 5 kids. No.
And we wouldn't be willing to, no matter how much we wanted, and how beautiful it is. And so, like, align yourself with the right people. If you're here, understand that, you know, Amy Lee and I may be a little bit further ahead of you, but you are further ahead of other people too. And, you know, you're never really behind. You're right where you are meant to be. Align yourself. Amy Lee and I, by accident, somehow connected on Instagram. And, you know, we've done all of these things now together, and we continue to rise together. And, you know, it's really, I believe, I always say, networking and collaboration has been honestly the thing that has allowed me to grow my business organically to 7 figures. And so never underestimate the power of that. But grow true, genuine relationships. Do not do anything. Invite people to a podcast with expectations of what you can get out of it. Like, truly just give, because trust me, it will absolutely be returned to you, and returned to you tenfold.
Absolutely. So well said. Jessie, you are amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I love you.
I love you too. And that'll do it for this week's episode of the Dream Design Podcast. Until next time, when we have another great guest, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, and may you be at peace. Namaste.